you for joining today. Yeah, very pleased to say that Gholam, Group Finance Director at Anavo, is going to be presenting for us today on mastering financial presentations. If obviously once Gholam's finished delivering the presentation, very much welcome input. Sharing of experiences or Q&A. If you have any questions that sort of crop up throughout the presentation, if you'd be good enough to pop those in the chat box, and then we can direct those to Gholam at the end. And as I say, yeah, very much encourage you to share your experiences. So without further ado, I shall hand you over to Gholam. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks for the introduction, and good afternoon, everybody. I take it everybody can hear me. Right? Let me know if there is any issue with the IT. As Louise alluded to, I'm going to be talking about what is a financial presentation and what's the best way to present financial data. I don't have any slides. I haven't put any slides together, so I'm going to do this presentation without having any presentation, effectively, without having any slides. So I'll be talking about three subcategories within financial presentation. One is the who are your audience, and how do you want to engage your audience, and what is the message that you want to convey through your presentation. I appreciate we have only 4 minutes allocated to this presentation. I try to keep my presentation as short as possible, 10 to 15 minutes, and I will be very interested in your views on this particular subject, that we can actually have a dialogue and have a discussion, and share your views as well. We can all benefit from each other's experience and views. Right, okay, so without any further ado, let's just dive into it. When it comes to presenting financial data, and when it comes to presentation, finance leaders to me are storytellers. Okay, and the financial data has to be in such a way which are quite relatable and memorable. Every picture in your presentation, whether it's a pie chart, whether it's a waterfall chart, or any picture, anything tells a story. And I strongly believe every number, any financial presentation also tells a story, or at least it should do. Think of financial presentation that you yourselves have actually sat through, and think of the amount of information and data and the figures, percentages that you were presented with, balance sheet, profit and loss account, cash flow statements, all kinds of data, all kinds of information, and all of that might mean something, and all of that is absolutely important, but you cannot possibly remember that. There is a tendency these finance leaders have, and they would like to go through absolutely all the data, everything that they have put through, because their team have actually spent hours, if not days, putting that data together. And you want to present that. You want to make sure you're presenting 100% of the data. So in my view, as the finance leaders, what is important is making the presentation, making the information more relatable and relevant. So let's think about telling a story, okay, on a particular issue that you want to highlight. Obviously, when you're presenting the financial information, there are all sort of data that you want to present. There are all sort of issues and areas that you want to focus on. But having, let's say, only 15 minutes or half an hour or 45 minutes, you cannot touch on every single issue. So you're going to have to pick your story. For example, okay, if I wanted to talk about obesity in the UK, and if I started giving you lots of numbers and percentages, if I said to you in 2022 to 2023, 64.0% of adult aged 18 years and over in England were estimated to be overweight or living with obesity. This is similar to 2021 to 2022, which was 63.8%, but there has been an upward obesity during the current year. So how would you feel? Okay, how much of that information would be useful to you and how relatable that information is? I've given you lots of numbers, I've given you 2 different periods, I've given you percentages, and you can easily calculate the increase between these 2 percentages over the 2 annual periods. Compare this to me presenting that information, exactly the same information, in the following format. If I said, out of 3 people, almost 2 people are at risk of overweight or obesity, and this is a global and complex public health concern. So immediately I've actually captured your attention. And if I went on to saying it is associated with the obesity and overweight is associated with reduced life expectancy and is a risk factor for a range of chronic diseases, including cardiovascular diseases, type 2 diabetes, cancer, liver and respiratory diseases, and can also impact on mental health. So the moment I'm actually associating that problem with obesity, immediately of actually capturing your attention. I'm not talking here on the second example, I'm not talking about percentages, I'm not talking about numbers, I'm talking about the effect of the obesity and being overweight. So it's already attracted the attention of the audience, okay, for 2 reasons. One is, it's simpler, of course, to remember that, and it's a lot easier to associate with it. We all know somebody who's probably suffering from those unfortunate diseases. And the moment you're talking about almost 2 out of 3 people would suffer from being overweight or obesity, obviously we are people. Okay, imagine yourself in a group of 3, 2 of those people statistically will actually suffer that sort of problem, will be in that category. And it becomes more personal, it becomes more relatable. So you understand that you are more engaged rather than me talking about 63%, 62%, 64% last year compared to this year, and this is the variance. So this is, when it comes to presentation, from my point of view, is getting your audience engaged. What they're going to do with the information later on, obviously, this is secondary, but the priority is to get them engaged, to understand the presentation, and to see the value that you're actually offering to them, and then they can actually take that further. So other example I was going to talk about here is if I said, on average, hourly rate has actually gone up by 9.7% from £10.42 to £11.44 over the course of, I don't know, the last 12 months or the next 12 months. You've just tuned out, and you've completely sort of, I've completely lost my audience. Compare that if I were to round that figure up, and if I were to make it a bit more relatable to the P&L, cost of sales, and compare it against the personal sort of, household income as well. If I said the rate has actually gone up by £1 per hour, and as you know, 65% of our turnover is absorbed by our staff costs. And again, as you know, 95% of our staff are on minimum wage. So therefore, doing all the calculation, the £1 extra cost in the minimum wage would actually equate to £2 million additional cost within our cost of sales. And everything else being equal on cumulative basis, so our bottom line by the year end would actually suffer £2 million compared to last year. And that is the opportunity for the finance leader to effectively reach out to 2 different departments. One is the sales department and the other one is the operational department, to invite them to kind of, close the gap, to invite them to help us to overcome these additional sort of costs. It would be useful to sort of compare that to household income as well, because If you use the household income as an example to sort of enrich this issue, the gap you have on your P&L, and if you said your income is £5,000, £6,000 for whatever reason, okay, and the cost of utility has actually gone up by £200, £300, or your cost of your mortgage has actually gone up by £500. So that £500 is going to eat into your disposable income. What it means is the money that you had available on disposable income, you could have spent on going on holiday, upgrading your car, perhaps getting in your kitchen done, will be spent on mortgage, or you will be spent on your utility costs. So they can easily relate that, because at the end of the day, you are presenting if you're presenting the information, financial information in the board of directors, everybody sitting at that table are stakeholders, and you all sitting in a ship, in my view, and you want the ship to sail safely and smoothly to its destination, and that's important to get everybody involved. Just going back to what I said, once you've actually identified the problem and the issue, reaching out to these two departments, I'm just using those departments as an example, is to invite them to close the gap, to invite them to come up with a strategy, with a solution. Sales can actually increase the sales. Sales can actually come up with a different product item, different service item to increase the top line, or perhaps they can actually increase the value of the item in the market, as long as it's not going to have the adverse effect on the turnover. And then obviously the operational department can actually start looking at the cost, perhaps be more cost efficient, or utilize the economies of the scales. Obviously, it's all going to be happening on a team-based basis. Everybody, all the directors, all the heads are actually working together to achieve that. But it's important to get everybody involved. And there is a conception that the person who's actually presenting the data is responsible for that data. So, which is completely wrong. Okay, as a finance leader, if you're actually presenting a very healthy P&L and you've got millions of pounds of profit on your P&L, you cannot take credit for that. Okay, and similarly, if the bottom line is a negative and is a loss, again, that is not your responsibility effectively. Your responsibility is just to produce the data timely and accurately, and literally put it in front of the directors, the other directors were presenting it to the board of directors, and make suggestions, make recommendations, and talk about financial risks. In my view, in any presentation should have 2 additional reports associated with it where possible and where it's required. One is recommendation. If you have identified a problem as a finance leader, you understand the organization, you understand the operation inside out, you need to make a recommendation. What can we do to close the gap? What can we do to bridge the gap? And also the financial risk, any organization has a risk register, no doubt. And obviously, a part of that risk register, there is a section which is financial risks. So that financial risk associated with the problem, the issues that you have identified needs to be updated, and it needs to be communicated at board level. So everybody should be aware of exactly where the gaps are and the potential solution to bridge the gaps. So in summary, when it comes to financial presentation, I think what's important is thinking about what is the story? Okay, what is it exactly I want to focus on today when it comes to presenting my financial data? And most importantly, who is my audience? If the audience is an investor, what do they want to hear? Is there a market for the product? Is it scalable? And how are you going to make money? So this is the type of information that your investors would like to hear. And what is your projection? What's your future trajectory? If your audience is analysts, and then they want to know the trend, the historic trend, and they want to see the future trajectory as well. So what if your audience don't have any maths or accounting or any sort of an accounting qualification or knowledge or degree? How do you get them engaged? I mean, a good example of that, okay, the company wants to issue shares and it wants to sort of, issue the shares to a member of the public. So how are we going to convince them that this is the right investment for you? This is the right, share that you really need to purchase and join the company. So I think in summary, it's extremely important rather than focusing on the numbers, variance analysis and the KPIs and sort of, cost of sales and overheads and SG&A, is package that into a relatable and memorable story and sort of communicate that depending obviously on your audience, and just get them engaged for however long the presentation is. Otherwise, what I have my experience in the past is the moment you start talking about numbers and the variances and percentages, you lose a big chunk of your audience and you lose their attention because they cannot follow you, because they can't sort of follow the numbers. I mean, that's the issue. So that's all I wanted to go through today. And I'm interested in your views. I'm interested in what is your view on financial presentation? What is your style? How do you present your data to various different audiences?
Well, I'm more happy than to share my experience. So
sure.
For me, finance shouldn't be boring, because especially we are foreseen as gray, or seen by external people as gray mouses. So in my opinion, when I reach out to the European board, it's all about storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be captivating, but luckily most of the people on a board are financially literate. They understand finance well enough so that numbers can be also interesting enough. So in one word, for me, or two words, storytelling.
Yeah.
The rest, if you pack it nicely in a little package, they'll go for it.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree with you. Okay, Nicholas, you seem to be in a very, very fortunate position, because the data, as you mentioned, you're providing and you're presenting it to the people who understand, or at least they have some knowledge of sort of that data. So it makes it a lot easier, doesn't it?
Mm.
I think I'd just like to add something, Gholam, to it's been my experience, obviously delivering different types of information, should I say, that if the people around the table can see something in it for themselves, then they're more likely to sort of engage with the presentation, which can be difficult, really. To I think your idea of storytelling, especially to non-finance people, and making it relatable, is definitely a constructive and positive way in. And yes, if they can see, if they're in sales or operations, how their job is either going to become easier or they can become more successful by taking on board some of the recommendations. Yeah, I think they need to see what's in it for themselves. And sometimes that's not always easy to get across, is it?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's all about packaging your presentation in a storytelling style, and focusing on one or two issues or one or two subjects. Otherwise, you will lose them, and the important issue for that particular sort of period, a month. Yeah.
I don't know if anybody's experienced sort of negative feedback from presentations. Has anybody experienced anything sort of really negative potentially in the boardroom that they've had to overcome, and perhaps how they might have dealt with those sorts of situations and pulled them back around to engage the audience? I don't know if you have, Gholam, experienced that, or if anybody else has that they might like to share.
I'm happy to share a little from my perspective. I have a very mixed board. I work in the creative industries. So there are half the board that cannot keep their eyes open on any sheet of numbers. Whatever you do, it's just not their bag. But then we have institutional investors on the same board. So if I just show pictures and tell a story, they are very unhappy because they want to see the detail and the numbers. So we very much try and package in advance have all the detail in P&Ls and charts and issue it days before. So then it's the storytelling in the meeting. But I know half the audience will not have read or understood the pack. So it is a storytelling of the two things you want them to take away from the meeting, because you could spend a few hours and they still wouldn't necessarily absorb the numbers. So it is picking the topic you want to highlight, but you have to give the detail to the half of the audience that absolutely would be angry if you didn't.
I fully agree with that, because from my point of view, also what I mean by storytelling is to make a nice story on the day itself, but the pre-read has been sent a week before and all the questions have been received, because we have quite senior people in our board. They'll eat you alive if you only do a storytelling, but without the pre-read. Definitely agree.
Absolutely, absolutely. I agree with both points. To be honest, yes, it's the board pack. We have absolutely all the information, okay, with regards to if you're presenting a group company or with the consolidated, and the appendix would have to have every single P&L and balance sheet, per company on it. So, but as you would imagine, the board pack would be running like 20, 25 pages, and it would be quite difficult to present all of that. And you're absolutely right, that goes out at least a week before the actual presentation. And there is a like a summary sheet and a storytelling sheet, which talks about the hot topics that we are facing, or any challenges that we are facing for that particular period, whether it's a monthly presentation or quarterly presentation. But the pack absolutely has to have absolutely everything in it. It has to be complete.
Excellent, that's great. Is there anything else that anybody would like to add, or maybe sort of see if other people have experienced similar situations before we close up today? If anything does come to light afterwards, we have the Guild app, as some of you I'm sure will have come across before, and Christiane will send details out with regards to the Guild app, which is a forum for finance directors, CFOs, so your peers, where sometimes these conversations continue, or people post other queries that they might have, sort of looking for different opinions and advice. So yes, please use that facility in the future if you need a sounding board. That should be helpful. Thanks ever so much, Gholam, for your time and for getting that presentation together. I'm sure we've all heard some things that we've either done before or we've stopped doing, so we can start doing again. And yes, thank you all for joining.